adage as old as time. Boys don't cry. But as time beats on, this seems to be becoming less and less true. Not only that, but it seems to me that the boys who don't cry, or at least spread their message of toxic masculinity, they seem to me to be the worst boys. And perhaps they should give crying a try before projecting their own emotional insecurities on everyone. So in this video essay, I'm going to talk about the beauty of having an unraveling conversation where its members partake in vulnerable dialogue. Before delving in, the examples in this video really do focus on male vulnerability, but I do think that its message is really important across all genders and all people. It's time to show you where I turn when I'm looking for philosophical insights about male vulnerability. Football Podcast. I watch so many football podcasts, and I don't know why, but I probably spend more time watching ex-players talking about football than I actually spend watching football. This is one podcast I like. And about a year ago, they had Thierry on as a guest, who I still haven't fully forgiven for the handball.
And by the way, not just once, George, but twice. It's actually hit him on the arm, and then he's controlled it with his hand.
But I thought this conversation was pretty interesting. Now, it starts off exactly as you may expect.
My motivation was everybody that was in front of me.
How come you never got past me then? Hey!
It took the big hands in it! I stayed longer, you know.
Just some ex-players talking about the glory days. But around 15 minutes in, the conversation takes a turn.
It came out well. I could have missed it. That's what the young players will want as well.
I'm on the subject of young players. What was it like being a young footballer growing up in Paris? And when did you start to realise that you had something?
Look, I'm going to try to... No, I'm not going to try to make it as simple as it is because we're here to talk for a long time.
Henri goes on to share multiple stories about his dad and his upbringing in France and how tough his father was on him.
Because in his mind, I'm his project. Now, reminiscing it, knowing what I know and what I realize, I know now that it was tough. You need to have a...
Were you scared of failure though?
You might fail that day, or what were you scared of? It's a great question, Alan. I grew up with having the fear of not being good enough for my dad.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to go deep now, sorry, but for a very long time, all I was waiting for is the approval of my dad.
Right.
I got it from billions of people. I just wanted it from my dad. Although he told me, but it's the little me that wanted to hear it. So I'm chasing something that I can never catch. Do you understand what I mean? I'm chasing something that I can never catch, so...
It took 8 minutes of talking about his youth to get to that level, but that is vulnerability. And what it does for the rest of the group in the podcast, it changes the whole trajectory of the conversation. Look at the stories that the others begin to share thanks to Henri opening up.
And people, I can't speak at the end of the game and explain my life, you know?
No, you can't do that. I had a very similar relationship with my dad. He wasn't
pushy, or he certainly didn't recognise I had talent when I was a tiny baby. But it wasn't until he was pretty much on his deathbed that we had serious conversations about, and because they actually moved house for me when I was 10 years old because they saw enough talent, because I couldn't play at a certain school that didn't play football. So
I kind of knew that he did, but then it wasn't until his deathbed that I actually said
one day, did you think I would make it? He went, I always knew. And I went, well, you could have told me. And the first time I ever heard him say, I love you, was the last conversation we ever had.
No way.
I've watched so many episodes of this podcast, and it's never been that vulnerable before. And it's all because of what Thierry Henry shared just before. And it's so sad.
Yeah, because, certain generations
hide their emotions and their love for you as well.
But how did that make you feel, Gary? How, Thierry's explained.
Yeah,
about...
I cried my eyes out when and I was in the lift I was in the hospital, and I was in a lift, and there's about 8 nurses came in, and I was absolutely sobbing, and they were going, "Are you okay?"
Wow.
I said, "Yeah, I'm actually really happy."
I'm really happy with my dad. I didn't explain why, but
That's just amazing. that clip, that conversation, the dialogue there. You can see how kind of cathartic it almost is to get that off your chest and say that, these kind of macho, athletic, competitive men sharing their deepest feelings. It's so weird to watch. And then Henri says something, he points out exactly what this video is about.
That was it.
You, Gary, by sharing, obviously it's contagious when you show vulnerability and you show empathy, so you brought me to that story.
He says it in passing. Obviously, it's contagious. But I don't know whether it is that obvious. And that's kind of what the rest of this video is all about. Go watch the rest of that conversation. A great, great conversation. Okay, so maybe he's right. Maybe it is obvious that vulnerability is contagious, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. I think for most of us, expressing ourselves isn't really our first instinct, and we probably repress things more than we should. I've always been quite sensitive, but when it comes to expressing my feelings and emotions, I typically put on quite a stoic front. And I never really thought that being inexpressive or not showing much emotion was a problem or something for me to work on. But in the last couple of years, I've started to really pay close attention to what media I'm consuming, what's resonating with me emotionally, and trying to figure out why. In 2022, I was living abroad for the first time, and I listened to Kendrick Lamar's first album in a couple of years, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. I remember I went for a long run, I listened to the entire album the whole way through, and I didn't like it. But I saved one or two songs from it that I thought were okay, and I moved on. Over the coming years, I found myself just constantly re-listening to those songs that I had saved, adding more songs from that album, to the point where now it's become possibly my favorite album. There is so much to unpack from that album, from generational and childhood trauma to Kendrick's relationship with his father, his identity, infidelity, cultural and social issues of the time. There's literally so much meat in that album that every time I go back and listen to it, I kind of pick up something new. Honestly, the level of introspection achieved in this album is so rare. Very few people ever reach that. And it's all told through the lens of Kendrick finally confronting his feelings and emotions through therapy and healing. In the mirror, Amity feel, ain't seen none scarier. I fought like a pit bull terrier, blood I shed could feel like aquariums. Tell them my angels carry them. Every emotion been deprived, even my strong points couldn't survive. If I didn't learn to love myself, forgive myself 100 times. And it was around the same time that I found myself really resonating with two characters from TV shows that I was watching. Connell from Normal People and Carmen from The Bear. Both of them are super reserved, super quiet, inexpressive people. They kind of throw themselves into distractions, and they're both kind of going through this deep emotional inner turmoil that never really gets spoken out loud until...
I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I had a stutter when I was a kid. I was scared to speak half the time. And I got shitty grades because I couldn't pay attention in school. I didn't get into college. I didn't have any girlfriends. I don't think I'm funny.
I hate it here, and I can never go back.
No spoilers here, but they both have their respective gut-wrenching, letting it all out, emotional release scenes, which in my opinion are two of the best scenes in television. I found myself constantly rewatching these scenes on YouTube, along with other examples from other TV shows and podcasts of people finally sharing their emotions after a long time pent up. And eventually it kind of clicked with me that maybe I wanted to share more. So I made a conscious effort to start doing that. And in the moments where previously if I thought, oh, I could say that, but I'd sound a bit stupid, this person might think I'm silly, I just started being honest and more open about how I felt, even if it made me a bit uncomfortable. It sounds super simple, maybe it is, but it took me 22 or 23 years to start doing it. And what I found is that Thierry Henry was definitely right. Vulnerability is contagious. It's led to me having deeper conversations with people who I care about and overall feeling much more connected to the people around me. Okay, so you like Kendrick. You like watching men cry on TV. But why does that matter, Stephen? Why is vulnerability an important issue? And to that I say, many of the world's biggest problems come down to men having issues with emotional regulation. Now that's a sweeping statement, but let me explain. Mobile phones and social media designed to bring us closer and connect us has left us feeling more isolated than ever. Remembering that vulnerability is contagious will not only help you, but you opening the door for a deeper conversation might find yourself helping someone share something they needed to share more than you could have imagined. Secondly, and this is something that I touched on in the introduction, some of the world's most powerful, horrible people are capable of doing these horrible things because they have issues with emotional regulation. Donald Trump had a notoriously difficult relationship with his father. Elon Musk described his childhood as deeply unhappy and his father as a terrible human being. Netanyahu, Putin, when you look into any power-addicted leader, oftentimes you find that their childhood and relationships with their parents were quite traumatic. But you have to remember the fathers of all these leaders lived through the worst event in human history, World War II, which itself was brought on by a man who had a deeply complicated relationship with his father and was undoubtedly unable to emotionally regulate. It makes sense when you think about it that many of the world's worst conflicts are caused by men with their own personal trauma, taking it out on the world and then creating new trauma for thousands, if not millions of other people, and the cycle continues. And on that note, let's try to be a bit more open and a bit more vulnerable, because obviously, it's contagious. Thanks for watching.
Sometimes you cry, at home because it's not cool to cry. When you cry, the first thing you do is, I'm sorry. Why would you be sorry from crying? It's kind of weird, but the first reaction that you do is, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes, you meant to cry. What are you saying sorry for? But anyway,